Before Brenda Whitfield-Carter ever saw that little girl's face, she had already decided the child would fail. She had $40,000 spread across her marble kitchen island, cameras tucked into the crown molding, and 35 years of bitterness sitting in her chest like a locked iron box. All she needed was one small hand to reach for one bill, and her whole dark gospel would be proven right again. But that Wednesday afternoon in Bel Air, the person who walked into Brenda's kitchen was not a thief. She was not a hustler. She was not one more hungry soul looking for a shortcut. She was a thin, 12-year-old foster girl from Sunnyside named Trinity Carter, carrying a Target backpack, a cracked women's devotional Bible, and a dead woman's lessons written deep into her bones. And here is what you need to understand before we go any further. Beloved, Brenda did not leave that money out by mistake. Brenda did not forget it. Brenda did not get old and careless. That cash was bait. Those bills were a trap. That kitchen was a courtroom. And in Brenda's mind, every person who stepped inside her house was already guilty until the money proved it. She had tested drivers. She had tested cooks. She had tested receptionists, groundskeepers, embalmers, housekeepers, church folks, family folks, folks who cried at funerals, and folks who quoted scripture with a straight face. Sooner or later, almost every one of them had folded. A quick glance, a nervous breath, a bill tucked into a pocket, a soul sold for less than a Sunday hat. Every failure went into Brenda's leather notebook. Name, date, amount, verdict. That notebook sat in her sitting room like a private Bible of disappointment, and Brenda read from it whenever grief tried to soften her. Everybody got a price, she told herself. Love got a price. Loyalty got a price. Faith got a price. You just have to leave enough money out and wait. That belief had kept her alive. After she buried her granddaughter, Patrice, and her second husband in the same season, it kept her from praying. It kept her from trusting. It kept her locked inside an 18-room mansion with white azaleas blooming outside and no joy blooming anywhere within. Brenda had money, power, and a gate taller than most people's dreams, but she did not have peace. Then Trinity walked in, saw enough cash to change her whole childhood, and did something Brenda had not seen in 35 years. She did not take it. She did not hide it. She did not even count it. She moved the candy dish, mopped around those bills, like they were nothing but an obstacle on the floor, and kept working like heaven itself was watching. If you only stay for the first minute of this story, stay long enough to hear this. The miracle was not that a poor child refused rich people's money. The miracle was that her refusal cracked open a woman who had been frozen for 15 years. One girl passed a test, yes, but what really happened was that Brenda's whole world failed. Before I walk you deeper into that kitchen, do me one favor, beloved. Hit the like button if stories about faith, family, and second chances still mean something to you. Subscribe so you can come back for the next one. And leave a comment telling me what city or state you are listening from, because I love knowing how far these testimonies travel. Now, keep your eyes on that marble island. Keep your ears open for that kitchen clock. Keep your heart ready, because this is not just a story about $40,000. This is a story about a grieving woman, a praying grandmother, and a child whose heart could not be bought even when the whole world had given her every reason to sell it. Brenda Whitfield-Carter was the kind of woman people called Big Mama because they feared her and respected her in the same breath. In Houston's black funeral home world, her name had weight. She had built her empire from one borrowed hearse, one two-room parlor on Dowling Street, and a stubbornness that could make bankers sit up straight. By the time Trinity came to her door, Brenda's money was old money, sorrow money, funeral money, money earned from dressing the dead and comforting the living. But grief had turned that money sharp. It no longer felt like blessing. It felt like proof that people wanted something, proof that hands reached, proof that nobody loved without calculating the cost. So when a caseworker sent Trinity to the Whitfield-Carter estate for part-time work, Brenda saw a child. Yes, but she also saw a question. Would hunger steal? Would loss steal? Would a girl with no mama, no daddy, and no safe home take what the world had never given her? Brenda already thought she knew the answer. God, beloved, was about to correct her. Brenda was 71 years old, but her face carried the weight of 5 lifetimes. She had buried her first husband at 40, a heart attack in the embalming room of the very funeral home he had helped her build. She had buried her second husband at 60, cancer, in the same bed, in the same master suite. She had buried her only granddaughter at 56 the same year, a drive-by on Scott Street that should have missed her, but didn't. She lived alone in that immense Greek revival mansion, 18 rooms, 5 fireplaces, a wraparound porch, a music room. Her second husband had curated piano by piano before he died, and a garden of white azaleas. She had planted the spring before the diagnosis. The azaleas still bloomed every March. She never cut them. She let them fall on their own, like prayers she refused to answer. Her staff feared her. Her remaining kin avoided her. Her rivals in the funeral home business respected her. She had no friends, only employees, only competitors, only ghosts. The mansion was her fortress. The money was her sword. And the test, the trap of the fanned bills, was her daily scripture. The only ritual she still kept sacred. Her first husband, James Whitfield, had been her partner in every sense. An embalmer by trade, a preacher's son by upbringing, a gentle giant of a man who could calm a wailing widow with a single touch. They had built Whitfield and Sons Funeral Home from nothing, one borrowed hearse and a 2-room parlor on Dowling Street. He died of a heart attack in the embalming room at 52, with his apron still on and his favorite gospel tape still playing on the boombox. Her second husband, Reverend Dr. Otis Carter, had been her redemption after James. A pulpit giant at Greater Zion Missionary Baptist, a man with a voice like a pipe organ and a faith that could move the Gulf itself. He had married her when she was a grieving widow of 42, and he had loved her through the death of her granddaughter with a steadiness she did not deserve. He died of prostate cancer at 68, in the same master suite, in the same bed, with Trinity's photograph, which he had never met, on the nightstand. Her granddaughter, Patrice, had been her heart. 16. Brilliant. A dancer who could make a stage weep. She had been walking home from rehearsal at the community center on Scott Street, when a bullet that was not meant for her found her anyway. Brenda had gotten the call at the funeral home, had driven to Ben Taub herself, had sat in that hallway for 3 hours while they worked on her grandbaby, and had known by the way the chaplain looked at her when she finally came out that Patrice was already gone. After Patrice died, the mansion became a tomb. Brenda locked her granddaughter's room. She locked the music room Otis had curated. She locked the garden gate where the white azaleas bloomed. She fired half the staff and hired new ones, strangers who wouldn't look at her with pity. She stopped going to Greater Zion, the church Otis had pastored. She stopped praying. She stopped eating at the dining table and took her meals alone in her sitting room, where the cameras fed her their daily evidence of human treachery. Every morning, she would arrange the money herself. Different amount, different location. Sometimes the kitchen island, sometimes the powder room sink, sometimes folded inside a hymnal on the piano bench of the music room. Then she would wait, watch, and let the cameras do their silent, patient, unforgiving work. By nightfall, she would review the footage in her sitting room. 9 times out of 10, she would see the same scene. A furtive glance, a pause, a hand reaching, a pocket swallowing. She would call the offender in the morning, hand them their final check, and quietly dismiss them, without a single word of reproach, without anger, without surprise. The new ones always thought they were slick. They thought she was old, distracted, perhaps losing her grip. They did not know that her mind was sharper than the blade of an embalming scalpel and colder than a Houston ice storm. They did not know that the test had never once in 35 years failed her until Trinity. Until the Wednesday afternoon, a thin, 12-year-old girl from Sunnyside walked through her back door, carrying a backpack from Target with one spare change of clothes and a calm that did not match her years. Until that afternoon, beloved, the test had been a perfect machine. After that afternoon, it would never work again. Trinity arrived in the middle of a Gulf Coast October, sent by a caseworker who had heard Big Mama Brenda was looking for a part-time helper in the funeral home's front office. She was thin as a reed, with box braids past her shoulders, dark eyes too old for her small face, and a quietness that made the groundskeeper, an old man named Uncle Jerome, look twice. She carried that backpack from Target. Inside were 2 shirts, 1 pair of jeans, a worn woman's devotional Bible with a cracked spine, and a photograph of an old woman with high cheekbones and a smile that you could almost feel through the picture. That photograph, beloved, was the only treasure she had left in the whole wide world. On the back of the photograph, in Big Mama Ruby's careful handwriting, were 3 words: pray, work, wait. She had written them the day Trinity came to her at 2 years old, she told her, because she wanted her to know that life was a long road, and that the road required all 3. Prayer to find the way, work to walk the way, and waiting, because some blessings took 15 years to arrive, and the pure heart does not give up before the blessing comes. Trinity had kept those 3 words in her heart ever since. She had prayed the morning Big Mama Ruby died, on her knees in the bedroom of the yellow house. She had worked dusting Mrs. Pearl's front office until her arms ached. And now she was waiting in the kitchen of a bitter woman's mansion, not knowing that the blessing was already walking toward her through the back door of the house in the shape of a cup of bitter chicory coffee. Her great-grandmother, Big Mama Ruby, had raised her in a small yellow house on Reed Road in Sunnyside since she was 2 when her mama was shot in a domestic dispute, and her daddy was already 3 years in the ground. She had named her Trinity after the threefold cord of Scripture that is not quickly broken. God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Ghost. 3 strands, 1 name, 1 promise. When Big Mama Ruby's kidneys gave out at 84, she held Trinity's hand in the back of a metro ambulance and said, "Trinity, baby, when I'm gone, you stay close to the Lord. You remember whose child you are. You do not bow to no woman. You do not steal. You do not lie. You fear the Lord, and the Lord will carry you the way he carried Esther." She closed her eyes before they reached Ben Taub Hospital and did not open them again. Trinity sat in the back of that ambulance, holding her hand for a long time after, while the paramedics did their work around her. She did not cry then. She had cried all her tears the week before, in the bedroom of the yellow house, when Big Mama Ruby had first told her the dialysis had stopped working. The foster system placed her in a group home on Scott Street in Sunnyside for 3 weeks. Then the caseworker, the same tired black woman named Ms. Pat, who had placed Caleb with Big Silas Jefferson the year before, heard that Big Mama Brenda was looking for a helper and thought, why not? The girl could use a steady gig. The woman could use some company, even if she didn't know it. Uncle Jerome, the groundskeeper, looked Trinity up and down at the front gate and shook his head. "Baby, you too small for this house. Big Mama gon' chew you up and spit you out." Trinity looked up at him with those old, calm eyes and said, "Big Mama Ruby said, the Lord would carry me. I ain't scared." Uncle Jerome stared at her a long moment, then let out a low whistle and opened the gate. "Go to the back door. Ask for Mrs. Pearl, the head housekeeper. She'll tell you what to do. And baby," he added as Trinity walked through, "do not touch nothing that ain't yours." Big Mama got eyes everywhere, even in the walls. Trinity walked through the gate and down the side path to the back door. The mansion loomed above her, 2 stories of old Houston brick and wrought iron, bigger than any house she had ever seen. She thought of Big Mama Ruby's yellow house on Reed Road, where you could stand at the front door and see straight through to the back. This house was different. This house had rooms inside of rooms. This house had secrets. But Trinity was not afraid. Big Mama Ruby had taught her that the Lord was bigger than any house, even one with eyes in the walls. Mrs. Pearl was a stout, no-nonsense woman from Acres Homes who had worked for Brenda for 14 years and had learned to keep her opinions locked behind her teeth. She looked Trinity over and sighed. "You will dust the front office of the funeral home. You will sweep the porch. You will polish the brass nameplate on the hearse. You will not enter Big Mama's private rooms. You will not speak to her unless she speaks first. You understand?" Trinity nodded. Mrs. Pearl handed her a feather duster and pointed her toward the funeral home's front office, a small building behind the main house. She dusted for 3 hours without stopping, even though her arms ached and her stomach growled, and the October heat pressed down on her like a hand. When she finished, the office was clean as a church sanctuary. Not a speck, not a streak. Mrs. Pearl came to inspect and could not find a single fault. She gave her a plate of smothered pork chops with rice and gravy and a piece of cornbread, and told her to eat quick. Trinity ate sitting on the back steps, the way Big Mama Ruby had taught her, and she bowed her head and thanked the Lord for the food before she took the first bite. Mrs. Pearl watched her from the kitchen window and said nothing. But her eyes were soft. It was on her 5th day in the mansion that Brenda set the snare. $40,000 in cash fanned out across the marble island in the kitchen. The door was open. Trinity had been sent to mop the kitchen floor. The cameras were rolling in their silent glass eyes. Up in the crown molding, Trinity walked in with the mop. She saw the money at once. How could she not? $40,000, fanned out like a peacock's tail. More money than she had ever seen in her life. More money than Big Mama Ruby had earned in 50 years of cleaning other people's houses and pressing other people's hair. She stopped. She stared. For a long moment, beloved, the whole house seemed to hold its breath. The cameras waited. Brenda, watching from her sitting room, leaned forward in her chair. Even Uncle Jerome, who had quietly bet Mrs. Pearl a bottle of bourbon that the girl wouldn't last the week, paused to see what would happen. Trinity looked at the money. She looked at the mop. She looked at the money again. Then, very slowly, very carefully, she moved the silver candy dish to the side, mopped around the money without disturbing a single bill, and went on with her work. She did not touch the cash. She did not even look at it again. In her sitting room, Brenda sat back in her chair. Her face, beloved, was a stone. She did not smile. She did not frown. But something behind her eyes, something that had been frozen for 15 years, cracked just a little, like ice on a Houston pond when the first warm wind blows across its surface. She let it go that day. She did not call the girl. She did not question her. She waited. Perhaps it was luck. Perhaps it was fear. Perhaps the girl was simply too green to know what was sitting in front of her. She would test again. She always tested again. The snare had never failed. The snare would not fail now. That night, in her sitting room, Brenda replayed the footage 3 times. She zoomed in on the girl's face. She watched her eyes. There was no calculation there, no hesitation. No glance at the ceiling where the cameras hid. She had simply mopped around the money, as if it were a piece of furniture, an obstacle to be cleaned around, not a temptation to be considered. She called Mrs. Pearl. "How long has the new girl been with us?" Mrs. Pearl answered. "5 days, ma'am." Brenda paused. "Has anyone spoken to her about the rules? About the cameras?" Mrs. Pearl hesitated. "No, ma'am. Shay's new. I was going to brief her at the end of the week." Brenda hung up without another word. The girl had not known. The girl had simply chosen, in the silence of her own heart, not to take. The next week, she placed $60,000 in the music room. Trinity was assigned to dust, tucked inside the hymnal on the piano bench, where she would have to move it to wipe the keys. 60,000. More than most of her staff earned in 2 years. She waited for the cameras to deliver their verdict. Certain of the outcome, Trinity dusted the music room. She moved the hymnal. She saw the money. She set it carefully on the lid of the piano, finished dusting. And then, when she was done, she carried the money out to Mrs. Pearl and said, "Ma'am, I found this in the hymnal. I think Big Mama must have forgotten it. Please return it to her." Mrs. Pearl's face went pale as communion bread. She took the money, counted it, looked at Trinity, looked at the money, looked at Trinity again. "Baby, do you know how much this is?" Trinity shook her head. "I don't count what don't belong to me, ma'am." Mrs. Pearl walked away, shaking her head. The money clutched to her chest like a live coal. That evening, Brenda could not eat. She sat at her credenza. The $60,000 stacked in front of her, the same bills the girl had carried out to Mrs. Pearl like a live coal. She touched them. They were warm from the girl's hands. She felt something she could not name. It was not anger. It was not relief. It was a kind of vertigo, as if the floor of her carefully built world had shifted 1 inch to the left. She had spent 15 years building a wall. Every theft, every betrayal, every dishonest hand had been a brick. The wall was high and thick, and she had believed it was impregnable. And now, with 2 simple acts of honesty, a 12-year-old foster girl from Sunnyside had not broken the wall. She had simply walked around it, as if it were not there, as if it had never been there at all. She brought it to Brenda. She told her what the girl had said. Brenda took the money, dismissed Mrs. Pearl, and sat alone in her sitting room for a long time, staring at the wall as if it held a message only she could read. Then she picked up the phone and called her investigator, a retired HPD detective named Boudreaux, the same one her brother Silas used. "Find out everything about the new helper," she said. "Where she came from, who her people are, who she belongs to." Boudreaux called back 3 days later. "Her name is Trinity Monet Carter, 12 years old, born at Bentaub, mother deceased, gunshot, father deceased, gunshot, placed in foster care at age 2, with one Ruby Nell Johnson, on Reed Road, Sunnyside." Boudreaux continued. "Ruby Nell Johnson, known in the neighborhood as Big Mama Ruby. Retired domestic worker and church mother at Greater Zion Missionary Baptist for 50 years. Widowed twice, no children of her own. Took in foster kids her whole life, maybe 40 of them over the years. Passed away 6 weeks ago. Kidney failure, at home, with the girl by her side." Brenda hung up the phone and sat very still. Ruby Nell Johnson. The name hit her like a thunderclap from a clear sky. Ruby Nell Johnson. The woman who 15 years ago had been the only one to sit with her in the Ben Taub hallway the night her granddaughter was pronounced. The woman who had held her hand and prayed with her until morning. The woman whose name she had forgotten in the long, bitter years of grief and gold. She had not known. She had not known that the girl was Big Mama Ruby's girl. She had not connected the Reed Road address, the high-cheekboned woman in the photograph, the calm in the girl's eyes. And now, sitting in her sitting room, with the cameras still rolling and the cash still untouched, she felt something she had not felt in 15 years. Shame. Brenda opened her old photo album. She had not opened it in 15 years. The pages were stiff, the photographs yellowed. She turned them slowly, past her first wedding, past her second wedding, past Patrice's dance recitals and holidays she had forgotten. And there, on the last page, a photograph she had forgotten existed, a Ben Taub hallway. A plain black woman with high cheekbones and silver-streaked hair sitting beside a chrome chair. In the chrome chair, barely visible, was Brenda herself, 56 years old, weeping. The memory came back like a flood. The night Patrice was pronounced. The hospital. The nurses who would not let her into the trauma bay. The woman who had appeared from nowhere, sat beside her, held her hand, and prayed until morning. Brenda had been so drowned in grief, she had never asked the woman's name. She had simply stayed, then slipped away before dawn, like an angel who had finished an assignment. And that woman, Brenda now understood, was Big Mama Ruby. The same Big Mama Ruby whose foster great-granddaughter now mopped her kitchen floor. The same Big Mama Ruby whose prayers, the girl said, had carried Brenda for 15 years. The same Big Mama Ruby who had died 6 weeks ago in a yellow house on Reed Road, never knowing that the grieving grandmother she had comforted had become the bitter woman who employed her girl. If this story is already touching something in you, beloved, I invite you to pause for just one moment and hit that like button. It costs you nothing, but it tells the algorithm that stories of faith and second chances still matter. And while you're there, subscribe so you never miss the next one. The next morning, Brenda did something she had not done since her granddaughter's funeral. She walked into the kitchen at 5:30 in the morning, before any of the staff had arrived, and she made a pot of chicory coffee with her own hands. She set out 2 mugs. She sat at the kitchen table, and she waited in the dark. When Trinity came in to begin her morning chores, she found Brenda sitting at the kitchen table, a mug of coffee in front of her and an empty mug across from her. Brenda looked up at her. Those old, calm eyes met her cold, questioning ones. "Sit," she said. "Drink with me." Trinity hesitated, then sat. She picked up the mug. She drank. The coffee was strong and bitter, the way Brenda liked it, but she did not flinch. Brenda watched her over the rim of her own mug. "Girl," she said, "why didn't you take the money? $60,000. You could've run. You could've bought a car and an apartment and lived like a queen for the rest of your childhood." Trinity set down her mug. She looked at Brenda, not with the fear Brenda was used to seeing in the eyes of her staff, but with a quiet steadiness that unsettled her. "Ma'am, Big Mama, Ruby taught me that what you don't earn, you don't eat," she said. "Stolen money fills the pocket but empties the soul. I don't want an empty soul." Brenda stared at her. She had heard many excuses over the years. "I needed the money. My baby was sick. The old woman got more than she need." She had never, in 35 years, heard a girl say, "I didn't want an empty soul." The words struck her like a slap. She did not know why. She only knew that something inside her, something that had been numb for 15 years, suddenly, painfully, woke up. Brenda was silent for a long moment. The kitchen clock ticked. The coffee maker hissed on the counter. Then she said, "Tell me about Big Mama Ruby." Trinity looked at her, surprised, but she began to speak. And as she spoke, the ice around Brenda's heart began, very slowly, to crack, the way Buffalo Bayou breaks open in the first warmth of a Gulf Coast spring. Trinity told her about the small yellow house on Reed Road, about the smothered pork chops and collard greens Big Mama Ruby made every Sunday, about the evening Bible stories by the window unit, about the scripture verses she made her memorize before she could read, about the way she prayed every morning, kneeling on the worn carpet, her voice rising like a song over Sunnyside. She told her about the night she died, how she had held her hand and told her not to be afraid, how she had said the Lord would carry her, how she had sat in the back of the ambulance holding her hand all the way to Ben Taub, and how she had not cried because Big Mama Ruby had told her the week before that she was going home to be with the Lord, and that crying was okay, but trusting was better. Brenda listened. She did not interrupt. She did not move, and as the girl spoke, the ice around Brenda's heart, the ice that had formed the night her granddaughter was pronounced in that Ben Taub trauma bay, the ice that had thickened when her second husband died. 2 months later, the ice that had hardened with every betrayal, every theft, every false friend, began very slowly to crack, then to groan, then to break apart. When Trinity finished, Brenda was quiet for a long time. The coffee had gone cold. The morning light was creeping through the kitchen window. Then she said, "Your great-grandmother's name." "What was her name?" Trinity looked at her, surprised. "Ruby Nell Johnson, ma'am. Folks called her Big Mama Ruby." Brenda closed her eyes. A single tear, the first in 15 years, slid down her cheek. "I knew her," Brenda whispered. 15 years ago, when my granddaughter was killed on Scott Street. She was the only one who sat with me in that Ben Taub hallway. I didn't even know her name. She just appeared. She held my hand. She prayed. She stayed until morning, and then she was gone. I never saw her again. I never thanked her. I never even asked her name. Trinity stared at her. You the woman from the hospital." Big Mama Ruby told me a story. She said once she sat with a grieving grandmother in a hospital hallway, and the woman's tears fell on her hand like rain. She said she never forgot that woman. She prayed for her every day for 15 years. Every single day, Mom, Brenda broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. She simply put her face in her hands, and her shoulders shook, and the sound that came out of her was the sound of 15 years of frozen grief finally thawing. Trinity did not move. She did not touch her. She simply sat the way Big Mama Ruby had taught her to sit, with those who weep, present, silent, steady. It was a long time before Brenda could speak again. The kitchen was bright with morning now. The coffee had long gone cold. The girl sat across from her, patient as a stone, her hands folded on the table. Brenda looked at those hands, small, thin, the hands of a child who had buried her own great-grandmother 6 weeks ago. And yet those hands had carried $60,000 to Mrs. Pearl without trembling. She said, "Trinity, why didn't your great-grandmother never come to find me? She knew my name. She knew where I lived. She could've come. I would've helped her." Trinity looked at her gently. "Ma'am," Big Mama Ruby said, "help that is sought ain't help. It's payment." She didn't want payment. She wanted to love you from a distance, the way the Lord loves us, without asking nothing in return. When Brenda finally lifted her head, her eyes were red and her face was wet. She looked at the girl across from her, this thin foster kid from Sunnyside, with the photograph in her bag and the Bible in her heart. And she said, "Your great-grandmother prayed for me for 15 years, and I didn't deserve one of those prayers." Trinity shook her head. "Mom, Big Mama," Ruby said, "prayer ain't about deserving. It's about love. She loved you because you were a woman who had lost her grandbaby, and she had lost children of her own." She said, "A grandmother's tears know another grandmother's tears, even across 15 years, even across a whole city, even across the silence of a forgotten name." From that morning on, beloved, everything changed in the Whitfield-Carter mansion. Brenda did not adopt Trinity, not legally, not at first, but she took her in. She gave her a room on the second floor, next to her own. She enrolled her at Young Woman's College Prep. She bought her books. She bought her a uniform. She sat with her at dinner every night. At first, the dinners were silent. Brenda did not know how to talk to a child. She had not spoken to one since Patrice was alive. Trinity did not know how to talk to a woman who wept at the kitchen table. So they ate in quiet, the only sound, the clink of silver and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. But the silence was not cold. It was the silence of two people learning each other. After a week, Trinity began to tell her about her day at Young Woman's, the teachers, the lessons, the other girls who wore finer clothes and laughed at her foster care shoes. Brenda listened. Then she said, "Don't let them laugh at you. Your great-grandmother was a church mother for 50 years. You carry her name. Hold your head up." The next day, she bought her the finest uniform in Houston, and a leather satchel, and a pair of polished black Oxfords. Trinity tried to refuse. "Mom, this is too much." Brenda shook her head. "It ain't too much. It's what a great-grandmother would do." The words hung in the air between them. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Then Trinity, very quietly, said, "Thank you, Mom." And Brenda, very quietly, said, "Thank you, my child." The first time she had called her that. The first of many. If this story is already moving your spirit, beloved, I invite you to share this video with somebody who needs to hear it today. A mama, a daddy, a foster kid, a grieving grandmother. Share it and leave me a comment below. I read every single one. Your words keep this channel strong. The staff did not know what to make of it. Mrs. Pearl, who had seen 14 years of cold Big Mama, was the first to notice the change. "The ice done melted," she told the cook one evening. "I don't know what that girl did, but the ice done melted." The cook, who had lost the bourbon bet with Uncle Jerome, simply shook his head and said, "It's the Lord. Only the Lord could melt that woman." Brenda began to pray again. Not in the music room, not at first. She could not bring herself to enter the room her second husband had curated, but she knelt by her bed. At night, the way Trinity had described, Big Mama Ruby kneeling. And she whispered the prayers she had forgotten. And slowly, slowly, the words came back to her, like old friends, returning after a long journey. One Sunday morning, 3 months after Trinity arrived, Brenda did something she had not done in 15 years. She walked to the music room. The door was stiff, the hinges rusted. She pushed it open. The air inside was thick with dust. The Bible Otis had kept on the piano bench was still there, open to the same page he had been reading the morning before he went into the hospital. She did not turn it. She knelt at the piano bench, in the dust, and she prayed. She did not know the words at first. They came back to her in fragments, the Lord's Prayer, the psalms her mama had taught her, the hymns she had sung as a girl at Greater Zion, back when Otis was just a young preacher with a crooked tie and a voice that made the rafters ring. Each word was a stone she lifted from a path she had abandoned. Each word was a candle lit in a dark room. By the time she rose, her knees were sore and her face was wet, but her heart, for the first time in 15 years, was light. When Trinity found her in the music room doorway, she did not ask what she had been doing. She simply took her hand, the way a great-granddaughter would, and walked her back to the house. Mrs. Pearl saw them from the kitchen window and dropped the spoon she was holding. She did not pick it up for a long minute. She just stood there watching Big Mama Brenda and the girl, walking hand in hand across the white azalea garden Otis had planted. That evening, Brenda did something she had not done since Otis died. She ate dinner at the dining table, not in her sitting room. At the long mahogany table in the dining room, with the chandelier lit, with the good china, with Trinity seated at her right hand and Mrs. Pearl at her left, the cook served smothered pork chops and collard greens and mac and cheese. They ate in silence at first. Then, Trinity told a joke about a mischievous squirrel in Big Mama Ruby's backyard. And Brenda laughed, and Mrs. Pearl laughed, and the cook came out of the kitchen to see what was happening. She asked Trinity one evening, "You ever miss her, Big Mama Ruby?" Trinity nodded. "Every day, Mom, every hour. But I don't grieve like folks with no hope. She taught me that. She said, grief without hope is a coffin. Grief with hope is a doorway. I walk through the doorway every morning, and I know she waiting on the other side." Brenda looked at her. "You 12 years old, and you talk like an elder." Trinity smiled, the first smile Brenda had seen from her. "Big Mama Ruby said I was born old. She said the Lord put an old soul in a young body so I could carry her wisdom when she gone." Brenda shook her head slowly. "She succeeded," she said. "She succeeded." The weeks turned into months. Brenda, who had not given a single dollar to charity in 15 years, began to give. Quietly at first. A donation to Greater Zion Missionary Baptist, where Big Mama Ruby had been a church mother for 50 years. A new roof for the Scott Street Community Center, where her own granddaughter had been killed. A scholarship fund for 2 foster girls at Young Woman's. She did not announce it. She did not seek praise. Sunnyside heard, and they sent a delegation, 3 deaconesses from Greater Zion and 2 old women from the Reed Road Block Club to thank her. They came to the mansion with a pan of sweet potato pie and a handwritten card, the way black folk thank a benefactor. And they stood on the porch and said, "May the Lord bless the hand that gives. May the Lord bless the feet that walk to bring relief." Brenda, who would once have had Uncle Jerome turn them away, came out herself. She helped them up the porch steps. She invited them in. She served them chicory coffee with her own hands. And when they told her stories about Big Mama Ruby, about her kindness, her wisdom, her unwavering faith, Brenda wept again, openly, in front of strangers, for the first time since she was a grieving grandmother in a Ben Taub hallway. After the delegation left, Brenda went to Trinity's room. She sat on her bed. She said, "Trinity, I want to see your great-grandmother's grave. I want to go to Golden Gate. Will you take me?" Trinity looked at her for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Yes, Mom. I'll take you. We'll go next Saturday." Brenda bowed her head. "Thank you, my child. Thank you." They drove to Golden Gate Cemetery. The following Saturday, Brenda in the back of her Cadillac, Trinity beside her. Uncle Jerome drove. The road was long, and the October heat was thick. Brenda watched the neighborhoods pass, the kids on porches, the women at bus stops, the men under shade trees. She had not been outside Bel Air in 5 years. The world had changed. She had not. And now, finally, she was changing too. When they reached the grave, Trinity stood for a long time at the headstone. Then, she led Brenda forward. Brenda knelt. She placed a single white azalea on the grave. She whispered, "Ruby, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I forgot. I'm sorry I didn't come. I'm sorry I didn't thank you. Forgive me. Forgive me." The wind picked up, just a little, and Trinity said, "She heard you, ma'am. She heard you." And while they were there, Trinity led Brenda to another part of the cemetery. Past the weeping oak, where her own husbands and granddaughter were buried. Past the new stones, to a section Brenda had not visited in years. There, side by side, were the graves of 2 men Brenda had not thought about in a long time. Big Silas Jefferson, the brother she had not spoken to in 20 years, and his foster boy, Dr. Caleb Johnson. Trinity pointed. "Mom, did you know them?" Brenda stared at the stones. "That," she whispered, "was my brother." That night, she went to Trinity's room. Trinity was reading her devotional Bible by the lamp, the way Big Mama Ruby had taught her. Brenda sat on the edge of her bed. "Trinity," she said, "I want to do something. I want to build a community center in your great-grandmother's name, on Scott Street, for foster girls, for girls like you. I want to call it the Big Mama Ruby House." Trinity set down her Bible, her eyes filled with tears. "Ma'am, Big Mama Ruby would have liked that. She always said the greatest gift you can give a child ain't money. It's a safe place and a hand to hold." Brenda nodded. "Then we'll build it. Together, you and me. In her name. For her memory. For the girls shall never meet, but will know her story. Beloved, if you believe that one act of kindness, even one prayer whispered 15 years ago, can bear fruit in ways we never imagined, please share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. And leave me a comment below. I read every single one. Your words keep this channel strong. The next year was a whirlwind. Brenda threw herself into the project with the same ferocity she had once thrown into building her funeral home empire. She hired architects. She bought the lot at the corner of Scott Street, where the drive-by had happened, the very lot where her granddaughter had fallen. She personally interviewed every mentor. She made sure the center would have a library, a kitchen, a chapel, and a backyard with a porch swing, the way Big Mama Ruby's yellow house had had. Trinity, who was now 13, helped where she could. She drew pictures of what she thought the center should look like. She suggested a magnolia tree in the backyard, like the one outside Big Mama Ruby's kitchen window. Brenda laughed, the first real laugh she had laughed in 15 years, and said, "Then there'll be a magnolia tree." And there was. Building the center took 18 months. Brenda hired the best architect in Houston, but she vetoed his design 3 times. It was too grand, she said. Too cold. She wanted a center that looked like a home, with wide porches and low roofs, and a backyard where girls could sit under trees. The architect, who had never been told his work was too grand, finally understood and produced a design that made Brenda weep. Trinity helped choose the mentors. She sat in on every interview. She asked each candidate one question, the same question Big Mama Ruby had once asked her. Why do you want to work with girls? Those who said for the paycheck were dismissed. Those who said for the summers off were dismissed. Those who said because I was a girl once and somebody believed in me, and I want to believe in another, those were hired. The center t-shirt was Trinity's idea. Lavender and cream, the colors of Big Mama Ruby's living room curtains. The center logo was a magnolia tree with the words Big Mama Ruby House curved around it. Under the tree, in small letters, the motto Trinity had chosen: learn, love, carry, 3 verbs, 3 commands, 3 things Big Mama Ruby had done every day of her life, and that she wanted every girl in the center to learn to do too. The center opened on a Saturday morning in March, the Houston spring, already warm, the air thick with jasmine and the sound of gospel. 200 foster girls and neighborhood children stood in the backyard under the magnolia tree in their new t-shirts and sang a song Trinity had chosen. It was Big Mama Ruby's favorite hymn, His Eye is on the Sparrow. The sound rose over Sunnyside like incense. Brenda stood at the back of the backyard and listened. She thought of her first husband, who had built the funeral home with her. She thought of her second husband, who had curated the music room. She thought of her granddaughter, who had died at 16 on this very corner. She thought of Big Mama Ruby kneeling on the worn carpet of a yellow house, praying for a grieving grandmother she had met only once, and she wept. But this time, beloved, the tears were not bitter. They were sweet. They were the tears of a woman who had been lost in the desert for 15 years and had finally found water. The tears of a woman who had believed everybody had a price and who had met in a thin foster girl from Sunnyside the one heart that could not be bought. After the opening, Brenda did something she had never done before. She called a meeting of all her staff: driver, receptionist, groundskeeper, cook, embalmer, everybody. They gathered in the front parlor of the funeral home. Nervous, unsure. Big Mama had never called them all together. Most assumed they were about to be dismissed, that the strange mercy of recent months had finally run its course. Brenda stood before them. She looked each one in the eye. Then she said, I owe y'all an apology. For 35 years I tested y'all. I left money in your paths. I watched y'all on cameras. I assumed the worst of every one of you. I was wrong, I was broken, and I tried to break y'all too. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. The room was silent. Mrs. Pearl, who had worked for her the longest, was the first to speak. Mom, we always knew about the tests. Some of us took the money, 'cause we was desperate. Some of us didn't. But we all knew, and we all stayed 'cause underneath the ice, we knew you was a good woman who'd been hurt. And we hoped one day the hurt would heal. Brenda looked at her. Y'all knew? All these years? Mrs. Pearl nodded. Ma'am, a housekeeper knows everything. We knew you was testing us. We knew you was grieving. We knew the money was your way of asking. Is there anybody left in this world I can trust? Most of us failed. But we kept hoping somebody would pass. We kept hoping the answer would finally be yes. Brenda's face crumpled. She sat down on the edge of the credenza, this powerful, feared woman, and she let herself be seen. And the girl passed, she whispered. Mrs. Pearl smiled. The girl passed, Mom. And through her, so did we all. The room let out a breath it had been holding for 35 years. Uncle Jerome, in the back, wiped his eyes with the hem of his jacket. After the staff meeting, Brenda did one more thing. She went to the kitchen, where Trinity had first been tested. She picked up the silver candy dish from the island. She carried it to the center of the marble, where the $40,000 had once been fanned out. She set it down. She filled it with peppermints, the way Otis used to keep it. Then she called the staff in, one by one, and gave each of them a peppermint and a personal apology. To the receptionist, she said, "I'm sorry I doubted you." To the embalmer, "I'm sorry I watched you like a hawk." To the driver, "Im's sorry I assumed you'd steal the gas." To Uncle Jerome, the old groundskeeper, she said, "I'm sorry I made you guard a house I had turned into a prison." To Mrs. Pearl, who had stayed the longest, she said, "I'm sorry. I forgot that you weren't just an employee. You were a witness to my grief. Thank you for staying." Each of them wept. Each of them forgave her. And, by the end of that afternoon, the Whitfield-Carter mansion was, for the first time in 15 years, a home. Not a fortress, not a museum of grief, not a stage for the test. A home with people in it who knew each other's names, who broke bread together, who swept the porch, not out of fear, but out of care. From that day, the tests ended. The cameras stayed for security, but the money traps stopped. Brenda raised the wages of every staff member. She gave them health insurance, which they had never had. She set up a fund for their children's education. She became, for the first time in 15 years, the woman her husbands would have recognized, the woman they had married, the woman they had loved. And Trinity. Trinity grew. She grew tall and strong and wise. She graduated at the top of her class at Young Woman's. She won a scholarship to study nursing at Prairie View A&M, then Nurse Practitioner School at UT Houston. She wanted to be a nurse practitioner, she said, because Big Mama, Ruby, had always said the greatest gift you could give a neighborhood was a healer who wouldn't overcharge the poor. Brenda paid for her nurse practitioner school herself, though the scholarship would have covered it. "Let the scholarship go to another foster girl," she said. "I got the money. Let me spend it on what matters. Let me spend it on the girl who taught me how to live again." And so Trinity went to UT Houston with her Bible and her photograph and the wisdom of two grandmothers, one in heaven and one in Bel Air. She wrote to Brenda every week. She told her about her classes, her professors, the friends she was making. She told her about the patients she saw in the Ben Taub emergency room, the mothers who walked 50 miles with sick children, the old women who could not afford their medicine. She told her she wanted to come back to Sunnyside when she graduated and open a clinic. Brenda wrote back. She told her about the Big Mama Ruby House, which now served 300 girls a week. She told her about the new wing she was building, a science lab. She told her about the magnolia tree, which had grown tall enough to shade the whole backyard. She told her she was old and tired and happy, the first happiness she had known since her granddaughter died. Beloved, if you've ever had somebody write you a letter that you kept and reread until the paper grew soft, you know what those letters meant to Brenda and to Trinity. If you have a person in your life who writes to you, who remembers you, who carries you in their heart across the miles, please hit subscribe so we can keep bringing you stories that honor that kind of love. The years passed. Trinity became a nurse practitioner. She returned to Sunnyside, as she had promised, and she opened the Big Mama Ruby Clinic right next to the community center. Brenda paid for the building, the equipment, the medicines. She came for the opening, in a wheelchair now, her legs too weak for the journey. And she sat under the magnolia tree and watched the first patient walk through the door. It was a young mother with a sick baby. The baby had a fever. Trinity examined the child, gave the mother medicine, refused payment. The mother wept and blessed her. Brenda watched from under the tree, and she whispered to the air, "Ruby, you see, your girl is a healer. Your prayers carried her, and they carried me. We all here because of you." Trinity ran the clinic the way Big Mama Ruby had run her house, with patience, with discipline, with love. She saw 40 patients a day, sometimes 50. She delivered babies in the middle of the night. She sat with the dying. She argued with pharmacists who tried to overcharge. She wrote letters to Brenda every week, telling her stories of the neighborhood, the patients, the small miracles that happened when folks who had nothing finally had a healer who wouldn't turn them away. Brenda, in her wheelchair, in the mansion, lived for those letters. She had them read aloud by Mrs. Pearl every Sunday morning in the white azalea garden Otis had planted. She laughed at the funny ones. She wept at the sad ones. She underlined the lines about Big Mama Ruby, the lines where Trinity said she had seen her great-grandmother in the face of an old patient, or heard her voice in the laugh of a child. She began to send money to the clinic. Not a fortune, just enough. A new microscope, a new generator, a new roof for the maternity wing. She did not want her name on any of it. She wanted it to be from Ruby, she said. From Ruby, through me, to the people she loved. Trinity understood. She did not put Brenda's name on the plaques. She put her great-grandmother's. Big Mama Ruby Maternity Wing, Big Mama Ruby Lab, Big Mama Ruby Children's Ward. 3 months after the clinic opened, Brenda fell ill. The doctors said it was her heart. Trinity came at once from Sunnyside, and she was the one who sat by her bed in the mansion, in Bel Air, holding her hand, the way Big Mama Ruby had held the hand of a grieving grandmother 15 years before. The circle was closing, beloved. The circle was closing. "Mum," Trinity said, "don't be afraid." Brenda looked at her, her eyes clear, her face calm. "I ain't afraid, my child. I ain't been afraid since the morning you sat at my kitchen table and drank my bitter coffee without flinching. You taught me how to live again. Now teach me how to die." Trinity did not cry. Not then. She simply held her hand. She said, "Big Mama," Ruby said, "grief without hope is a coffin. Grief with hope is a doorway. You, Mom, have been my doorway. You carried me when I had nobody. And when you go, ill carry your name the way I carry hers. The two names will walk together in my mouth until my own mouth closes, and then they'll walk together in the mouths of the children. Brenda smiled. Then, I ain't afraid at all. She closed her eyes. She took 3 slow breaths, and on the 4th she did not breathe again. Trinity sat with her for a long time, holding her hand, the way Big Mama Ruby had taught her to sit with those who pass, present, silent, steady, until the sun moved across the floor and the room grew cold. Brenda was buried next to her husband's and her granddaughter in the family plot at Golden Gate Cemetery, under a marble headstone that Trinity had chosen. The inscription read, Brenda Whitfield-Carter. She was broken. She was healed. She learned to love again. The whole neighborhood came. The staff, the girls from the center, the patients from the clinic, the deaconesses from Greater Zion. Even Uncle Jerome, old and bent, came to weep. At Brenda's funeral, Trinity did not give a long speech. She stood at the front of Greater Zion, the very pulpit Otis had pastored from for 30 years, looked out at the hundreds of faces, and said only this, Beloved, Big Mama Brenda Whitfield-Carter was a woman who believed everybody had a price. She was wrong. Her own heart had a price, and the price was 1 cup of bitter chicory coffee, shared with a thin foster girl from Sunnyside who wouldn't take her money. May she rest in peace. May we all learn, before our own time comes, that love is the only currency that matters. Then she sat down. The church was silent for a long moment. Then, from the back, Mrs. Pearl stood up. She walked to the front. She looked at the casket. She said, simply, Thank you, Mom, for giving us a second chance, for letting yourself be healed. Uncle Jerome stood next. Then the receptionist. Then the embalmer. One by one, the staff of 35 years stood and spoke. It was the most beautiful funeral Sunnyside had seen in a generation. And then, after the staff had spoken, a figure rose from the very back of the church. An old man, bent but proud, with a young woman at his side supporting his arm. Trinity did not recognize him at first. Then she did. It was Uncle Roy, the gateman from the Jefferson mansion across town, and beside him, a woman with kind eyes and a calm that did not match her years. Trinity, the woman's voice was soft. Ruby Jefferson. Caleb's girl. I came to sit with you the way Big Mama Ruby sat with Big Mama Brenda. A widow's tears know another widow's tears. In her will, Brenda left everything to Trinity. The mansion, the funeral home, the money, everything. But Trinity, beloved, did not keep it for herself. She turned the mansion into a home for foster girls. She used the funeral home to fund the center and the clinic, and to offer free funerals for families who could not afford them. The way Big Mama Ruby's own funeral had been paid for by the church. She lived in a small house on Reed Road, next to the clinic, and she worked as a nurse practitioner for 30 years. She never married. She said her heart was full. She had the girls at the center, the patients at the clinic, the memory of 2 grandmothers, one who had raised her and one who had found her. She said, a woman with that much love did not need a husband to be complete. She said, the Lord had given her more family than any woman could deserve, but she did adopt 5 foster girls over the years. She raised them the way Big Mama Ruby had raised her, with stories and prayers and the magnolia tree in the backyard. She taught them the verses Big Mama Ruby had taught her. She taught them the lessons Brenda had taught her. She taught them that everybody got a price, but some people, the rarest and most precious, got a price of 0, cause their hearts belonged to the Lord. When Trinity was old, when her braids had gone silver, and her hands trembled, and she could no longer hold a stethoscope steady, she sat under the magnolia tree at the center and watched the girls play. A young foster girl came and sat next to her. "Grandmama Trinity," she said, "tell me the story again, the story about Big Mama Brenda and the money on the island." Trinity smiled. She told her the story. She told her about the snare of the fanned bills. She told her about the Wednesday afternoon. She walked into the kitchen and saw $40,000 fanned out like a peacock's tail. She told her about the cameras, the cold woman in her sitting room, the ice around her heart that had been frozen for 15 long years. She told her about the second test, the 60,000 in the hymnal on the piano bench. She told her about carrying the money to Mrs. Pearl like a live coal. She told her about the morning the woman made chicory coffee with her own hands and sat across from a thin foster girl from Sunnyside and wept for the first time in 15 years, and how that weeping was the beginning of healing. She told her about Big Mama Ruby, the great-grandmother who prayed for a grieving grandmother she had met only once. She told her about Brenda, the grandmother who had been broken and healed. She told her about the center, the clinic, the magnolia tree, the 5 foster girls she had raised, the thousands of children who had passed through those gates over the years. The girl listened with wide eyes. When she finished, she said, "Grandmama Trinity, why didn't you take the money? You was poor. You was hungry. You could have run." Trinity looked at her and smiled, the same calm smile she had given Brenda that morning in the kitchen 50 years before. "'Cause, baby, Big Mama Ruby taught me that what you don't earn, you don't eat." Trinity lived to be 72. In her final years, she could no longer walk to the clinic. The girls of the center would come to her small house on Reed Road every afternoon and read to her. She liked the Bible best, but she also liked stories of faraway places, of cities she had never seen, of oceans she had never crossed. She said she was saving the travel for heaven. Big Mama Ruby would be her guide. On the morning she died, she was sitting under the magnolia tree at the center. The same tree she had asked Brenda to plant 40 years before. It was now tall and broad, its leaves casting shade over the whole backyard. She was holding Big Mama Ruby's photograph in one hand and Brenda's old Bible in the other. She closed her eyes. She smiled, and she was gone, as quietly as a candle going out. The whole neighborhood came to her funeral. 3,000 people. They stood under the magnolia tree in a light Gulf rain, and they sang, "His eye is on the sparrow," the same hymn that had been sung at the center's opening 40 years before. The foster girl, now a woman, stood at the front and wept openly. Then she took Trinity's photograph, the one of Big Mama Ruby, and placed it on the altar of Greater Zion. Side by side, the 2 grandmothers, Ruby and Brenda, watched over the children they had loved. At Trinity's funeral, the young woman lifted her face and said, "She taught me that stolen money fills the pocket but empties the soul. She taught me that the Lord knew what he was doing when he sent her to that kitchen. Big Mama Brenda needed a heart that could not be bought. Trinity needed a woman who would learn to love again. They saved each other. Big Mama Brenda and Grandmama Trinity did. The girl nodded, solemn. Grandmama Trinity, I want to be a pure heart too. Trinity put her hand on her head, gently, the way Big Mama Ruby had once put her hand on hers. Then you already are, baby. Then you already are. The choice to want it is the beginning of having it. That's the secret Big Mama Ruby taught me, and now I done taught it to you, beloved. Before this story ends, I want to ask you something. Was there ever a moment in your life when you were tested, when the easy path was the wrong path, and you chose the harder, right, over the easier, wrong? If you've ever made that choice, please leave me a comment below. I want to hear your story. Your story matters to this community, and if you haven't yet subscribed, please do so now. Ring that notification bell so you never miss a story. Hit the like button. Share this video with somebody who needs a reminder that pure hearts still walk among us, that goodness still moves in Sunnyside, and Third Ward, and Bel Air, and every ward. That prayer still works, even across 15 years of silence. Let me tell you one more thing about Trinity, beloved, before I close. In her 30 years as a nurse practitioner in Sunnyside, she never once charged a patient who could not pay. She kept a small jar under the counter of her clinic. The jar was for those who could pay, and they put in what they could, sometimes nothing, sometimes a chicken, sometimes a handful of greens from a backyard garden. When folks asked her why she didn't move to the suburbs, where she could've been rich, where she could've had a big house and a big car and a big name, she would smile and say, Big Mama Ruby said, a woman who chases money will only catch money. A woman who chases the Lord will catch the Lord, and money will chase her. I caught the Lord. The money I needed always came, and it did. The clinic was always broke on paper, but it never lacked. When the roof leaked, a stranger appeared with shingles. When the medicine ran low, a donation came from somebody who had heard the story. When Trinity needed a new instrument, it arrived in the mail, anonymously. She said it was Big Mama Ruby's prayers, still working, still moving, still providing. 15 years after she had closed her eyes, Brenda's mansion, now the home for foster girls, became famous across Houston. Folks came from Fifth Ward, from Third Ward, from Acres Homes to see it. They came to see the kitchen where the test had happened. They came to see the table where Brenda and Trinity had shared their first cup of bitter chicory coffee. They came to see the marble island where the $40,000 had been fanned out like a peacock's tail. The mansion was kept exactly as it had been. The silver candy dish still sat on the island. The cameras were still in the crown molding, though they had not been turned on in years. The kitchen clock still ticked, and in the corner of the sitting room, behind the credenza, where Brenda had watched her staff for 35 years, there was now a small altar with 2 photographs. One photograph was of Big Mama Ruby, the great-grandmother with high cheekbones and a smile you could almost feel. The other was of Brenda, the woman who had been broken and healed. Between the 2 photographs was a small plate, And on the plate, every morning, the girls of the mansion would place a single white azalea picked from the garden Brenda's second husband had planted the spring before he died. Beloved, if you're still here, if you've listened all the way to this point, I want to bless you. I want to tell you that the same Lord who carried Trinity from a yellow house on Reed Road to a mansion in Bel Air, the same Lord who melted the heart of a bitter woman with the prayers of a great-grandmother 15 years old, that same Lord is carrying you, has carrying you through whatever you're facing right now, through the grief, through the loneliness, through the betrayal, through the long dark nights when you can't see the road. Hess carrying you the way Big Mama Ruby said he would carry the Trinity. And one day, beloved, one day you'll look back and see the footprints in the sand, and you'll know. If this story has blessed you, please don't leave in silence. Subscribe, like, share, comment. Tell me where you're listening from. Tell me who in your life was the Big Mama Ruby, the praying grandmother. Tell me who was the Brenda, the broken one who learned to love again. Tell me who was the Trinity, the pure heart that couldn't be bought. Your comments ain't just words on a screen. They're testimonies. They're the continuation of the story. Every comment you leave is a seed planted in the heart of another listener who is struggling, who is doubting, who is wondering if goodness still exists. Your words might be the very thing that carries somebody through their own dark night. And so, beloved, as we close this story, I want you to remember 3 things. First, everybody got a price, but the rarest and most precious hearts got a price of 0, 'cause they belong to the Lord. Second, prayer ain't about deserving, it's about love. And a grandmother's tears know another grandmother's tears, even across 15 years of silence. Third, grief without hope is a coffin, but grief with hope is a doorway. And on the other side of that doorway, all the ones who carried you are waiting, smiling, ready to welcome you home. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. Until the next story, beloved. Until the next story. And if you haven't yet clicked that subscribe button, please do it now. Don't wait. Don't tell yourself you'll remember later. Click it now. Ring the bell. And leave me one comment, just one, telling me from which city or state you're listening. I'll read it. I'll pray for you by name. That's my promise to you, beloved. Go in peace. Go in hope. Go in the knowledge that pure hearts still walk among us, that prayer still moves mountains, that love, real love, the kind that can't be bought, the kind that can't be sold, the kind that holds your hand in a hospital hallway at 3 in the morning and doesn't ask your name. That kind of love, beloved, that kind of love always wins, always. Now, before I let you go, I want to share one final image with you. On the day Trinity herself passed from this world to the next, at the age of 72, under the magnolia tree, at the center, the girls of the mansion and the center and the clinic all gathered. They carried her body to the small cemetery behind Greater Zion, where they buried her next to a marble stone. The stone read, Trinity Monet Carter, NP. She was the girl who wouldn't take the money. She was the woman who taught a bitter woman to love. She was the great-granddaughter of Ruby, the granddaughter of Brenda, the mother of 5, the healer of thousands. Her heart had a price of 0, and because of that, her love had no end. And on the day of her burial, the young foster girl, now a woman, the one who had asked her to tell the story one last time under the magnolia tree, stood at the grave and said, "Grandmama Trinity, I'll keep telling the story. I'll keep telling it to my girls, and they'll tell it to theirs. The story won't die. The pure hearts won't disappear. As long as one person remembers, the chain continues. And so it does, beloved, and so it does." The story you just heard didn't end with Trinity. It didn't end with Brenda. It didn't end with Big Mama Ruby. It continues in you, in the choice you make tomorrow when nobody's watching, in the prayer you whisper for somebody you've never met, in the hand you hold in the dark. And if you've been with us from the beginning, if you remember Big Silas Jefferson and his foster boy Caleb, if you remember the Mama Dorothy house on Drew Street and the pecan tree, then you know this story is part of a larger story, a chain of pure hearts stretching across Third Ward and Sunnyside and Acres Homes and every neighborhood in this city. Big Silas was the first link. Big Mama Brenda was the second. Trinity was the third. And you, beloved, you are the next. If you've listened to the very end, if you've walked with me through every scene of this story, then you're already part of the chain. You're already a pure heart, or you're becoming one. And so I ask you one last time, with all the love in my heart, please subscribe, please like, please share, please comment. Not for me, for the next listener who needs to know they ain't alone. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Until we meet again, beloved, until the next story, go in peace, go in love, go in hope. Amen.